I am Olivia, 32 years old, and I am standing at my father's funeral wearing the only black dress I own. A simple thing I bought at a discount store 6 years ago for a job interview I didn't get. Around me, the cathedral is filled with over 500 mourners dressed in designer black, dripping with gold and diamonds, dabbing at dry eyes with handkerchiefs that cost more than my monthly rent. They are here to honor Richard Hartwell, billionaire industrialist, philanthropist, pillar of the community, beloved husband and father. They are not here for me. Most of them don't even know I exist. To the world, Richard Hartwell had one child, his golden son Brandon, the heir apparent, the pride of the Hartwell dynasty. I am the other one. The mistake. The daughter from the first wife who died tragically when I was 5 years old, leaving my father free to marry Victoria, the woman who made it her life's mission to ensure I was erased from the family portrait. I stand at the back of the cathedral, near the door, watching the performance unfold. Brandon is in the front row, accepting condolences with the practiced grace of a man who has been preparing for this moment his entire life. He is wearing a bespoke suit that probably cost more than I make in 3 months at my accounting job in Chicago. His mother Victoria sits beside him, veiled in black lace, clutching a rosary she has never used for actual prayer. She looks appropriately devastated, though I notice she keeps checking her phone beneath the folds of her dress, probably monitoring the stock price of Hartwell Industries, making sure her husband's death hasn't caused too much damage to her portfolio. The priest is speaking about my father's generosity, his commitment to family, his deep faith. I want to laugh. I want to scream. I want to stand up and tell everyone that the man in that mahogany casket hadn't spoken to me in 4 years, that the last words he said to me were, "You are just like your mother," and that is not a compliment. That the great philanthropist who built schools and hospitals couldn't be bothered to attend my university graduation or remember my birthday or acknowledge that I existed except when he needed to remind me of my place. But I don't do any of those things. I stand quietly, invisibly, watching the show. I am only here because the family lawyer, Mr. Sullivan, called me 3 days ago and said my presence was required for the reading of the will. Required. Not requested. Not invited. Required. It was the first time anyone from my father's world had contacted me in years. I almost didn't come. I almost told him that whatever crumbs my father had left me, he could mail them to my apartment. But something in the lawyer's voice gave me pause. He sounded nervous, almost frightened, and Mr. Sullivan was not a man who frightened easily. He had been my father's lawyer for over 30 years. He had seen everything, handled everything, buried secrets that would destroy lesser families. For him to sound afraid meant something was very wrong, or very right, or very complicated. So I came. I took 3 days off work, bought a plane ticket to New York, and now I am standing in this cathedral full of strangers, waiting for a funeral to end so I can collect whatever insult my father has prepared as his final message to the daughter he never wanted. 1 hour into the service, my phone vibrates in my purse. I almost ignore it. Phones are supposed to be silenced in church, and I have enough social anxiety without being the person whose ringtone interrupts a billionaire's funeral. But something makes me check. The screen shows Mr. Sullivan's name, the family lawyer, calling me in the middle of the funeral he is attending. I can see him from where I stand, seated in the second row, his phone pressed to his ear, his body angled away from the altar. He is looking around the cathedral, searching for someone, searching for me. I slip out the side door into the courtyard, pressing the phone to my ear. "Miss Olivia," he whispers urgently, "where are you? I need to speak with you immediately. Before the service ends. Before the family sees you." I'm outside. The courtyard. What's happening? Listen to me very carefully. What I'm about to tell you changes everything. Your father's will, the real one, not the one Victoria and Brandon have been planning to present, names you as the sole heir of Hartwell Industries. Everything, the company, the properties, the accounts, all of it goes to you. I feel the world tilt beneath my feet. That's impossible. My father hated me. He wrote me out of his life years ago. He wrote you out of his public life. But privately, secretly, he made arrangements. I have the original will, signed and witnessed, and legally unassailable. I've had it in my safe for 3 years, with instructions to reveal it only upon his death. Miss Olivia, you are about to become one of the wealthiest women in America, but you are also in danger. Danger? What are you talking about? Victoria knows. Somehow, she found out about the will. She and Brandon have been planning for this. They have a forged document. A fake will that leaves everything to Brandon. They intend to present it at the reading this afternoon and challenge any claims you might make. They have bribed officials, intimidated witnesses, prepared a legal strategy to tie you up in courts for years. By the time the truth comes out, they will have stripped the company of everything valuable. My heart is pounding so hard I can barely hear him. Why are you telling me this? You've been their lawyer for decades. Why help me? There is a pause. When he speaks again, his voice is heavy with something I can't identify. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. Because there is something else you need to know. Something that will walk through the door of that cathedral in approximately 3 minutes. Something that will change everything you believe about your life. What are you talking about? Your mother, Miss Olivia. Grace Hartwell. She is alive, and she is coming to claim what was stolen from her. The phone slips from my fingers. I hear it clatter on the stone floor of the courtyard, but I cannot move to pick it up. My mother, Grace, the woman whose photograph I have kept in a locket around my neck since I was 5 years old. The only image I have of her, because Victoria burned every other picture in the house. The woman whose grave I have visited every year on the anniversary of her death, leaving flowers and prayers and tears. The woman I have mourned for 27 years. Alive. The word echoes in my mind, refusing to make sense. I was told she died in a car accident. I was told her body was too damaged for an open casket. I was told she was buried in a private ceremony while I was too young to attend. I was told, and I believed. And I built my entire identity around the absence of her, around the hole she left in my life that nothing and no one could ever fill. I pick up the phone with trembling hands. That's not possible. She's dead. I've been to her grave. I've seen the death certificate. The grave is empty. The death certificate was forged. Your father paid to have her disappeared, Miss Olivia. He sent her away, threatened her, made her believe you would be killed if she ever tried to contact you. She has been living in Canada for 27 years, watching from a distance, waiting for the day when it would be safe to come home. Why? Why would he do that? Because she was going to leave him. She was going to take you with her. She had discovered things about his business, things that could have sent him to prison. He couldn't allow that. So he made her vanish and told everyone, including you, that she was dead. I hear a commotion from inside the cathedral. Voices rising, the scraping of chairs, the kind of disturbance that interrupts even the most solemn occasions. Mr. Sullivan's voice comes through the phone, barely audible now. She's here. Go to the main door. See for yourself. And Miss Olivia, whatever happens next, know that your father loved you. In his broken, twisted way, he loved you. That's why he left you everything. That's why he kept your mother's letters. All 342 of them, hidden in a safe that Victoria never knew existed. He was a monster, but he was also a man who wanted to make things right before the end. He just ran out of time. The line goes dead. I walk toward the main entrance of the cathedral, my legs moving without conscious instruction. The carved wooden doors are open, and sunlight is streaming in, creating a rectangle of gold against the darkness of the interior. And standing in that rectangle, silhouetted against the light, is a figure I have seen only in photographs and dreams. She is older than in my memories. Her hair now gray, her face lined with the weight of years and sorrow. But her eyes are the same, dark and warm and filled with a love so profound it crosses the distance between us like a physical force. She is wearing a simple white dress, a deliberate contrast to the sea of black around her. She is holding a folder thick with papers, and she is looking directly at me. The cathedral has fallen silent. 500 mourners are staring at the woman in the doorway, trying to understand who would interrupt a funeral in such dramatic fashion. I see Victoria rise from her seat, her face contorting with recognition and fury. I see Brandon start to move toward the door, his security team falling in behind him. I see Mr. Sullivan close his eyes, as if in prayer, but I see only her, my mother, Grace, alive, Olivia. Her voice carries across the cathedral, strong and clear despite the trembling I can see in her hands. My daughter, I have waited 27 years to say this to you. She takes a step forward, then another. The crowd parts before her, unsure whether they are witnessing a miracle or a scandal. I am Grace Hartwell, first wife of Richard Hartwell, mother of his only legitimate heir. She raises the folder she carries, holding it like a weapon, and I am here to reclaim what was stolen from us. Before we continue, I need you to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what happens next is the moment everything changes. The moment 27 years of lies come crashing down. The moment I discover just how deep the betrayal goes, and just how far I'm willing to go to get justice for my mother and myself. The silence in the cathedral lasted exactly 4 seconds. I know because I counted each one, my brain clinging to numbers the way it always did in moments of chaos. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the silence shattered, and chaos erupted. Victoria was the first to move, surging up from the front pew with a shriek that echoed off the vaulted ceilings like the cry of a wounded animal. Security! Get this woman out of here. She's an imposter. A fraud. She's trying to disrupt my husband's funeral. 2 men in dark suits moved toward my mother, reaching for her arms, prepared to drag her from the cathedral like a common intruder. But my mother didn't flinch. She stood her ground, holding that folder against her chest like a shield, and her voice cut through the commotion with an authority I didn't know she possessed. Touch me and I will have you arrested for assault. I am Grace Elizabeth Hartwell, and I have documentation proving my identity, my marriage, and my claim to everything in this room. The courts have already been notified. The press is waiting outside. If you lay one finger on me, this scandal will be the only thing anyone remembers about Richard Hartwell's legacy. The security men hesitated, looking back at Brandon for direction. He had frozen halfway down the aisle, his face cycling through emotions like a slot machine, disbelief and recognition and fear and calculation all competing for dominance. He knew. Looking at him, I understood that he had always known, or at least suspected. The way he was looking at my mother wasn't the confusion of someone seeing a ghost. It was the terror of someone watching their carefully constructed lies collapse in real time. This is ridiculous, Victoria declared, pushing past the security men to confront my mother directly. Grace Hartwell died 27 years ago. There was a funeral. There was a grave. There was a death certificate. I don't know who you are or who put you up to this disgusting stunt, but you will not desecrate my husband's memory with these lies. My mother smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent nearly 3 decades preparing for this exact moment. The funeral was empty, Victoria. The grave contains nothing but stones, and the death certificate was forged by your husband, with the help of a corrupt official who has already provided a sworn statement in exchange for immunity. Would you like me to continue? The crowd was buzzing now, phones appearing despite the solemnity of the occasion, people whispering and pointing and recording. This was the kind of scandal that would dominate New York society for months, years even. The resurrection of the first wife at her husband's funeral. It was the stuff of soap operas and Lifetime movies, except it was happening in real time, and I was standing in the middle of it, unable to move or speak or fully process what was unfolding. My mother's eyes found mine across the chaos. She extended her hand toward me, a gesture so simple and so powerful that it cut through my paralysis like a blade. Olivia, come to me, child. Come meet your mother. I walked toward her. I don't remember making the decision to move. I don't remember my feet touching the marble floor or my body weaving through the crowd of stunned mourners. I only remember reaching her, standing before her, looking into eyes that were somehow exactly as I had imagined them during all those years of longing and grief. You're alive, I whispered, the words barely audible even to myself. I am alive. Tears were streaming down her face now, cutting tracks through the careful composure she had maintained. I am so sorry, Olivia. I am so sorry it took this long. There hasn't been a single day in 27 years when I didn't think of you, didn't pray for you, didn't dream of holding you again. Why? The question came out as a sob. Why did you leave me? Why didn't you come back? I needed you. I needed you so much, and you weren't there. I didn't leave you, my daughter. I was taken from you, threatened, told that if I ever tried to contact you, they would hurt you. I was given photographs, surveillance images of you walking to school, playing with other children, eating at restaurants. They showed me how easy it would be to reach you, how unprotected you were. And they made me understand that the only way to keep you safe was to stay away. He did that? My father did that. Your father was a complicated man. He loved you, in his own broken way. But he loved his empire more. He couldn't allow me to take you away, and he couldn't allow me to expose his secrets. So he created a solution that let him keep both. A dead wife he could mourn publicly while keeping me alive and silent in exile. Victoria was screaming now, demanding that someone do something, threatening lawsuits and police action and a dozen other consequences that seemed to matter less and less with each passing moment. Brandon had retreated to the front of the cathedral, huddled with a group of men I recognized as the company's senior executives, probably trying to figure out how to spin this disaster into something survivable. The priest had abandoned his position at the altar, slipping away through a side door to avoid being drawn into the conflict. And the mourners, those 500 pillars of New York society who had come to pay respects to a great man, were watching the spectacle with undisguised fascination, their phones capturing every moment for posterity. "What happens now?" I asked my mother. She took my hand, squeezing it with a strength that belied her age. "Now we claim what is ours. Now we make them answer for what they did. Now we finally get justice." Mr. Sullivan appeared beside us, looking 20 years older than he had an hour ago. "Ladies, perhaps we should continue this somewhere more private. The reading of the will is scheduled for 3 o'clock at my office. I suggest we adjourn there before this situation becomes even more complicated." "The will is a forgery," Victoria spat, having pushed through the crowd to confront us directly. "Whatever document you're planning to present, it won't stand up in court. Richard would never have left anything to that woman's daughter. He told me himself, many times. She was a mistake he regretted every day." I flinched at the words, old wounds reopening despite my best efforts to appear unaffected. But my mother stepped forward, placing herself between me and Victoria like a shield. "My husband said many things over the years, Victoria. Many of them were lies. But his last will and testament was not a lie. It was the one honest thing he did in the final years of his life. And when it is read this afternoon, you and your son will understand exactly how much he regretted the choices he made." She turned to me, her expression softening. "Come, Olivia. We have much to discuss before the reading. 27 years of your life that I have missed. I want to hear everything." I looked back at the cathedral one last time, at my father's casket still resting before the altar, at the chaos we were leaving in our wake. Part of me wanted to go to him, to stand before his body and demand answers he could no longer give. But another part, a larger part, understood that the man who could answer my questions had never really been my father at all. He had been a stranger wearing a familiar face, playing a role in a drama I hadn't even known was being performed. I took my mother's hand, and together we walked out of the cathedral, leaving the funeral behind us. The next few hours passed in a blur of revelations that rewrote everything I thought I knew about my own life. My mother and I sat in the back of a hired car, Mr. Sullivan in the front seat beside the driver, as she told me the story of how my childhood had been stolen and how she had spent nearly 3 decades planning to steal it back. My parents had met at Columbia University in the late 1982. She was a law student from a modest family in Connecticut, brilliant and ambitious, and determined to make something of herself in a world that still believed women belonged in supporting roles rather than leading ones. He was a business student from old money, charming and driven and utterly convinced that rules were for other people. They fell in love quickly, married young, and had me before my mother had even finished her degree. For a few years, they were happy. Or at least, my mother thought they were happy. She didn't know about the other women, the shady business deals, the connections to powerful men who operated outside the law. She didn't know until she found documents in his office one night, records of bribes and money laundering and contracts with politicians who had blood on their hands. She confronted him. That was her first mistake. My father didn't appreciate being confronted, didn't appreciate being questioned, didn't appreciate anything that threatened his carefully constructed empire. He told her to forget what she had seen, to focus on being a wife and mother, to leave the business to him. She refused. She told him she wanted a divorce, that she was going to take me and leave, that she would expose him if he tried to stop her. That was her second mistake. 3 days later, she disappeared. I listened to her describe how she was taken from our home in the middle of the night, how she was driven to a remote location and told that she had a choice: leave America forever and never contact her family again, or watch as something terrible happened to her daughter. They showed her photographs of me, surveillance images that made clear just how vulnerable I was. They showed her newspaper articles about children who had been kidnapped, hurt, killed in a city where such things happened all too often. And they told her that if she ever tried to come back, if she ever tried to contact me, I would become one of those statistics. So she left. She went to Canada, then London, then back to Canada, when her money ran out. She worked as a domestic helper, a shop assistant, a cleaner, doing whatever she could to survive while she watched from afar as her daughter grew up without her. She collected newspaper clippings about my father's company, tracking his rise from wealthy businessman to billionaire industrialist. She saved every photograph of me she could find, the few that appeared in society pages when I was young, the even fewer that appeared after Victoria and Brandon became the public face of the family. She wrote letters she could never send, filling notebooks with words meant for a daughter who thought she was dead. And she planned. She contacted lawyers in multiple countries, gathering evidence of my father's crimes. She tracked down witnesses who could testify to the fraud and corruption that had built Hartwell Industries. She found the corrupt official who had forged her death certificate and negotiated his cooperation in exchange for protection. She built a case so comprehensive that it would take decades to fully unravel, a legal nuclear weapon that she could deploy only when the timing was right. The timing became right 3 years ago, when my father was diagnosed with cancer. Somehow, she learned of his illness before it was publicly announced, perhaps through the network of informants she had cultivated over the years. She contacted Mr. Sullivan, who had been my father's lawyer but who had also harbored his own doubts and regrets about the things he had helped cover up. Together, they approached my father with a proposition: confess, make amends, leave his fortune to the daughter he had wronged rather than the wife and son who had helped him do the wronging. In exchange, my mother would not release the evidence she had gathered. The Hartwell name would remain intact, the company would continue to operate, and my father could die believing he had done at least one good thing in his miserable life. To everyone's surprise, he agreed. He was dying, my mother explained, her voice soft with something that might have been forgiveness or might have been contempt. Dying men often find religion, or at least something resembling a conscience. He knew what was waiting for him on the other side, and he wanted to tip the scales in his favor. So he signed a new will, naming you as his sole heir. He also wrote letters, 342 of them, one for every letter I had written to you over the years. He told you about me, about what he had done, about why. I don't know if you should read them. Some truths are too painful to bear. Where are they now? In Mr. Sullivan's safe, along with the original will and enough evidence to send Victoria and Brandon to prison for the rest of their lives. I turned to look out the window, watching Manhattan slide past in a blur of traffic and noise and chaos. The city of my birth, the city of my exile, the city where my entire life had been a lie constructed by people who were supposed to love me. What about them? I asked. Victoria and Brandon. What happens to them? That depends on you, my mother said. We have enough evidence to destroy them completely. Criminal charges, civil suits, public humiliation. They would lose everything. Their freedom, their reputation, their precious social standing. Or we could negotiate. Allow them to walk away quietly. Keep some small portion of their wealth, in exchange for their full cooperation and silence. It's your choice, Olivia. Your inheritance, your decision. I thought about it. I thought about all the years of being invisible, of being reminded that I was less than, of being treated like a mistake that should have been avoided. I thought about the birthday parties I wasn't invited to, the family photographs that didn't include me, the inheritance I was always told I would never receive. I thought about Victoria's casual cruelty and Brandon's smug superiority and my father's cold indifference. And I thought about what my mother had said, that my father had loved me in his broken, twisted way, that he had left me everything because he wanted to make things right. I don't want to destroy them, I said finally. I just want what's mine, and I want them to admit what they did, publicly, completely, with no room for doubt or denial. My mother smiled, and this time there was warmth in it. That can be arranged. If you've ever waited years for justice, if you've ever wondered whether the truth would ever come out, I need you to hit that like button right now. Because what happens next is the moment of reckoning, the moment when 27 years of lies are finally exposed. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation, and let's keep going. The reading of the will took place in Mr. Sullivan's office, a sleek modern space on the top floor of a building in Midtown Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Victoria and Brandon arrived with a team of lawyers, all of them radiating aggressive confidence, clearly prepared to challenge whatever document we presented. They barely acknowledged my mother and me, treating us like insects that would soon be swatted away. But as Mr. Sullivan began to read the will, I watched that confidence drain from their faces like water from a cracked basin. The document was comprehensive and airtight. It left the entirety of Hartwell Industries to me, Olivia Grace Hartwell, sole legitimate heir of Richard James Hartwell. It specified that Victoria was to receive nothing beyond the personal items already in her possession, and Brandon was to be removed from all positions within the company, effective immediately. It acknowledged my mother, Grace Elizabeth Hartwell, as the lawful first wife whose marriage had never been legally dissolved, making Victoria's subsequent marriage bigamous and therefore void. It included provisions for the disclosure of documents proving the fraud that had been perpetrated against my mother and me, and it concluded with a personal statement from my father, read aloud by Mr. Sullivan in a voice heavy with emotion. To my daughter Olivia, I leave everything I have, because she deserves everything I failed to give her. I was a coward and a villain, and I allowed others to convince me that my own child was an obstacle to be managed rather than a blessing to be treasured. I know that no amount of money can undo the damage I have caused, but I hope that this inheritance will at least give her the freedom I denied her mother, the freedom to live on her own terms, unburdened by the legacy of my sins. I am sorry, Olivia. I am sorry for every birthday I missed, every tear I caused, every moment of happiness I stole from you. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me, but I will understand if you cannot. Some sins are too great for forgiveness. I know this because I carry the weight of mine into whatever awaits me on the other side. The room was silent when Mr. Sullivan finished reading. Victoria was pale, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. Brandon was staring at the will as if he could change its contents through sheer force of hatred. Their lawyers were already whispering among themselves, probably calculating how quickly they could distance themselves from a losing case. This is fraud, Victoria finally managed. He was ill. He wasn't in his right mind. He was manipulated by that woman into signing something he didn't understand. The will was signed 3 years ago, Mr. Sullivan replied calmly, when Mr. Hartwell was still in full possession of his faculties, as verified by 3 independent physicians, whose statements are attached to the document. It was witnessed by 2 federal judges and notarized by a certified public notary. I would be happy to provide copies of all relevant documentation to your legal team, though I suspect they will advise you that a challenge would be both expensive and futile. Brandon stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. This is insane. I've worked for that company my entire life. I've given everything to build what my father built. And you're telling me it all goes to her? To someone who hasn't set foot in the office in years? Who doesn't know the first thing about running a multinational corporation? Your father's wishes were clear, Mr. Sullivan said. If you have concerns about the transition, I'm sure Miss Olivia would be willing to discuss an appropriate severance package. I stood, facing my half-brother for the first time as an equal rather than an inferior. Actually, I think we should discuss something else first. I want to know about the forged will. Brandon's face went blank, but I saw the panic flicker in his eyes before he suppressed it. I don't know what you're talking about. The will you and your mother prepared to present at this reading. The one that leaves everything to you and nothing to me. The one that required bribing 3 officials and threatening a witness who saw you meeting with a known document forger last month. I turned to Mr. Sullivan. Do you have the evidence? He nodded, producing another folder from his desk. Photographs, bank statements, recorded phone conversations. The investigation has been ongoing for several months. The authorities have already been notified. Victoria's composure shattered completely. She lunged across the table, reaching for the folder, but one of her own lawyers held her back. You can't do this, she hissed. You can't prove anything. It's our word against yours, and we have connections you can't imagine. Your connections are currently being investigated by the FBI and the SEC, Mr. Sullivan said mildly. Several of them have already agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. I'm afraid your network is not as reliable as you believed. I watched the woman who had made my childhood a misery, who had whispered poison into my father's ear for decades, who had stolen my mother from me and tried to steal my inheritance. I watched her realize that everything she had schemed for was slipping away, and I felt something unexpected wash over me. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. The weariness of someone who has been fighting for so long that she has forgotten what peace feels like. I'm not going to press charges, I said. Everyone in the room stared at me, including my mother. Olivia, she started, but I held up my hand. I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it for me. I don't want to spend the next 10 years in courtrooms, reliving every painful moment of my childhood, fighting over money and power that I never even wanted. I just want to move on. I want to build a life that has nothing to do with any of this. I looked at Victoria and Brandon. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign a document admitting what you did. The forged will, the fraud, all of it. The document will be sealed. But if you ever try to challenge my inheritance, or harm me, or my mother in any way, it will be released to the press and the authorities. You're going to leave New York and never come back. You can take your personal belongings, your jewelry, whatever fits in a suitcase. Everything else stays. And you're going to do all of this quietly, without drama, without lawsuits, without any attempt to salvage your precious reputation. In exchange, I won't send you to prison. Brandon looked like he wanted to strangle me. Victoria looked like she was calculating whether the offer was genuine. Why? She asked finally. After everything we did to you, why would you let us walk away? I thought about it for a moment, searching for the right words. Because I don't want to be like you, I said. I don't want to spend my life consumed by revenge and resentment. I don't want to become the kind of person who destroys others to feel powerful. You took 27 years from me and my mother. I'm not going to let you take any more. I turned to my mother. Is that okay with you? She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. If that's what you want, Olivia. This is your inheritance, your decision. I looked at Mr. Sullivan. Draw up the papers. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal documents, board meetings, press conferences, and more decisions than I had made in my entire previous life combined. I learned more about running a multinational corporation in 30 days than most people learn in 30 years, and I discovered that I was better at it than anyone, including myself, had expected. The board members who had been loyal to Brandon quickly realized that their careers depended on adapting to the new reality, and most of them proved surprisingly cooperative once they understood that I wasn't interested in revenge, just in running the company effectively. I hired a team of consultants to audit the company's practices, rooting out the corruption and illegality that had been endemic under my father's leadership. Several executives were fired. A few were referred to law enforcement, and the rest learned quickly that the new era would be different. I also made changes to the company's charitable giving, redirecting funds from the vanity projects my father had favored to organizations that actually helped people. Schools in underserved communities, health care for those who couldn't afford it, legal aid for women escaping abusive situations. My mother stayed with me through all of it, not as an advisor or a business partner, but simply as a presence. She moved into the family estate in the Hamptons, reclaiming the home she had been forced to leave 27 years ago, and I visited her every weekend, sharing meals and stories, and the thousands of small moments we had missed during our long separation. Sometimes we talked about the past, about the pain and the loss and the years that couldn't be recovered. Sometimes we talked about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead now that we were finally free. And sometimes we just sat together in silence, letting the simple fact of each other's presence be enough. Victoria and Brandon left the country within 2 weeks of the will reading, relocating to some European country where they could live in comfortable obscurity on the money they had managed to hide before my father's death. I didn't keep track of them. I didn't want to. They were part of a chapter of my life that was finally, blessedly closed. 6 months after my father's funeral, I stood on the balcony of my new office, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the city sprawled beneath me like a living organism, chaotic and beautiful and endlessly complex. I thought about the girl I had been when I arrived for that funeral, invisible and ignored and certain that she would always be second best. I thought about the woman I had become, powerful and respected, and finally, after 32 years, at peace with who she was. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Dinner is ready. Don't work too late." I smiled, typing back a quick response. On my way. I gathered my things and headed for the elevator, leaving the office behind. The work would still be there tomorrow. The meetings and decisions and endless responsibilities of running an empire I had never asked for. But tonight, I would sit with my mother and eat the food she had cooked and listen to stories about the life she had lived during all those years apart. Tonight, I would be not a CEO or an heiress or a symbol of corporate transformation, but simply a daughter, reunited with the mother she had thought she lost forever. The elevator doors closed, and I descended toward the lobby, toward the car that would take me to the Hamptons, toward the family I had finally, miraculously reclaimed. The past could not be undone. The years that had been stolen could not be returned. But the future stretched out before me like an unwritten page, blank and terrifying and full of possibility. I was Olivia Grace Hartwell, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. This is the moment in the story where I'm supposed to talk about forgiveness, and I want to be honest with you. I haven't forgiven my father, not completely. I'm not sure I ever will. What he did to my mother and me was monstrous, a betrayal so profound that no amount of posthumous generosity can fully erase it. But I've learned something important in the months since his funeral. Forgiveness isn't a destination, it's a journey. Some days I feel closer to it than others. Some days the anger and grief rise up so strongly that I can barely breathe. But I keep walking, keep processing, keep working through the complicated tangle of emotions that his legacy left behind. What I have found is something perhaps more valuable than forgiveness. I've found peace. Not the peace that comes from resolution or closure, but the peace that comes from acceptance. I accept that my childhood was what it was, painful and lonely, and marked by loss. I accept that I cannot change the past, only learn from it. I accept that the people who hurt me were themselves broken, damaged by their own wounds and weaknesses and fears. This acceptance doesn't excuse what they did. It doesn't make the pain disappear, but it frees me from the burden of carrying that pain with me into every new day, every new relationship, every new chapter of my life. If you're watching this and you've experienced betrayal, if someone you trusted has stolen something precious from you, I want you to know that healing is possible. It may not look the way you expected, it may not come as quickly as you hoped, but it is possible. You are stronger than the people who hurt you. You are more than the worst thing that happened to you. And you deserve a future that isn't defined by your past. Please hit that like button if you believe in second chances. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories of resilience and redemption. And in the comments, share your own experience. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? Have you ever been reunited with someone you thought you'd lost? Your stories matter. Your voices matter. And together, we can build a community of people who refuse to let their pasts define their futures. 1 year after my father's funeral, I organized a ceremony at the estate in the Hamptons. It was a small gathering, just my mother, Mr. Sullivan, and a few close friends I had made during my transformation from invisible daughter to corporate leader. We gathered in the garden where my mother had planted flowers during the first year of her marriage, the same garden where I had played as a small child before my life was shattered. I had commissioned a memorial, not for my father, but for the years that had been stolen. A simple stone bench beneath an oak tree, with a small plaque that read, "For Grace and Olivia, who found each other again. Some bonds cannot be broken, only delayed." My mother cried when she saw it. I cried too. We held each other beneath the spreading branches, letting the tears flow freely, releasing the last reservoirs of grief that we had been carrying for so long. The other guests stood at a respectful distance, giving us the privacy we needed for this moment of shared healing. When the tears finally stopped, my mother took my hand and led me to the bench. We sat together, looking out over the garden she had planted and the home she had reclaimed. And she spoke words that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "I spent 27 years waiting for this moment," she said. 27 years dreaming of seeing you again, holding you again, telling you how much I love you. There were times when I thought it would never happen. Times when the hope felt like a cruelty, a taunt reminding me of everything I had lost. But I never stopped believing. I never stopped fighting. Because I knew, somewhere deep in my soul, that we would find our way back to each other. She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman of her age. "You are my greatest achievement, Olivia. Not this company, not this house, not any of the things that the world measures success by. You. The woman you have become, despite everything that was done to you. The strength you have shown, the grace you have demonstrated, the compassion you have extended even to those who didn't deserve it. That is my legacy. That is what I am most proud of." I leaned my head on her shoulder, feeling the warmth of her presence, the solid reality of her existence. For so many years, she had been a ghost, a memory, a photograph in a locket. Now she was here. Flesh and blood and love. And I would never again take that miracle for granted. I love you, Mom. I said. I love you too, my daughter. Always and forever. We sat there together as the sun set over Long Island, as the leaves rustled gently around us, as the past finally released its hold on our hearts. We sat there, mother and daughter reunited, and we let ourselves imagine the future. All the years ahead that we would share. All the moments that would no longer be stolen. The next morning, I went to my father's grave. It was the first time I had visited since the funeral. The first time I had felt ready to face him, even in death. The cemetery was quiet, the marble headstone gleaming in the early light, the inscription reading only his name and the dates of his birth and death. Nothing about his achievements, his wealth, his legacy, just the bare facts of his existence. I stood before the grave for a long time, searching for the words that would express everything I felt: anger, grief, love, hatred, pity, confusion, all of it swirling together in a storm that threatened to overwhelm me. But when I finally spoke, the words were simpler than I expected. I don't forgive you, I said. I don't know if I ever will. What you did was unforgivable, not just to me, but to Mom, to yourself, to everyone who trusted you and believed in you. You had everything: talent, resources, opportunities that most people can only dream of, and you used them to hurt the people who loved you most. I paused, watching a bird land on a nearby tree, its song cutting through the silence. But I understand now that you were broken. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it helps me make sense of it. You were so afraid of losing control, of being vulnerable, of letting anyone see the real you, that you destroyed everything good in your life. You destroyed Mom. You almost destroyed me. And in the end, you destroyed yourself. I knelt beside the grave, placing my hand on the cool marble. I'm choosing to let go of the anger. Not for your sake, but for mine. I don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying the weight of your mistakes. I want to be free, truly free. And that means releasing you. So I'm releasing you, Dad. I'm letting go of the pain you caused and the love I wanted you to give. I'm moving forward. I stood, brushing the grass from my knees. Goodbye, Dad. I hope you found whatever peace you were looking for. I hope the end brought you some measure of redemption. But either way, I'm done waiting for you to save me. I saved myself. I walked away from the grave without looking back. The morning sun was warm on my face. The world was waking up around me. And somewhere across Long Island, my mother was making breakfast in the home that was finally, rightfully hers. I was Olivia Grace Hartwell, daughter of Grace, heir of Richard, survivor of 27 years of lies and loss. I had been invisible, but now I was seen. I had been powerless, but now I held the reins of an empire. I had been alone, but now I had my mother by my side. The future was uncertain, as all futures are. There would be challenges ahead, difficulties I couldn't predict, storms I would have to weather. But for the first time in my life, I faced that uncertainty without fear, because I knew now what I was capable of. I knew that I could survive anything, overcome anything, emerge from anything stronger and wiser and more determined than before. My name is Olivia, and this is my story. A story of betrayal and redemption, of loss and reunion, of the bonds that can never be broken no matter how hard the world tries to tear them apart. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with anyone who has ever felt invisible, overlooked, written off by the people who were supposed to love them. Share it with anyone who is waiting for their own miracle, their own moment of truth, their own resurrection. And remember, no matter how dark things seem, no matter how hopeless your situation appears, you are never truly alone. There are people who love you, even if you can't see them. There are forces working on your behalf, even if you can't feel them. And there is always the possibility of a new beginning. Hit that like button if you believe in miracles. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories of hope and healing. And in the comments, write these words my mother waited 27 years to hear. Words that everyone deserves to hear at least once in their lives. I am worthy of love. Because you are. You always have been. And nothing anyone has ever done to you can change that truth. This is Olivia, signing off. And somewhere in the Hamptons, in a house filled with flowers and love, and the sound of a mother's laughter, a new chapter is just beginning.